Now we're ready to get to the heart of synth programming in Omnisphere. This occurs in the Edit page, where we can access the detailed synth programming parameters for each of layer A or layer B within a patch. Unless the layers are linked, programming is completely independent for each of the two layers. Here we see the programming area. In this video, I'll give you an overview of the primary functions of the Edit page and of the signal flow involved. Always keep in mind that synthesis involves sound production, sound modification, and modulation of audio parameters. On the left and right-hand sides of the Edit page, you'll find some of the main page controls we've already looked at, duplicated for your convenience. These are called the patch common controls, and they allow you access to parameters that can affect either layer A or B without having to switch layer views. In addition, you'll find controls for layer transposition and fine-tuning. Here we have an example of a patch that uses only a single layer, and that layer is using a synthesized sound source. You can tell that this is the case because the oscillator section in the center has the synth tab enabled with a particular digital waveform selected, and the mix section on the left has only a single layer activated. So we see that the sound sources are selected within the central oscillator section, and we know that these sound sources can either be sample-based or digitally synthesized. Here's an example of a patch where layer A is utilizing a sample-based sound source, as we can see from the central section. We can also see that this patch has two active layers, as indicated on the left-hand side mix area. Here's the central oscillator section. Sound source type is selected with the top two buttons. Directly below that, we have the digital waveform selector, which is available when the synth option is selected. If sample is selected, you'll be presented with the sound source browser. After sounds leave the oscillator section, they arrive at the filter section. It contains a power switch, zoom settings, preset pop-up selector, and typical filter controls. This section provides access to two filters at a time. There are many types of filters available, and these can be selected from the preset selector or from within the zoom settings dialog. The oscillator section itself contains numerous sound shaping possibilities. Some of these processes are specific to digital waveforms and some to samples. The buttons at the top of this highlighted area give us access to each of these functions, and directly below these are power switches to turn them on or off. Next stop on our tour are our two main modulators, LFOs, that's low frequency oscillators, and the envelopes. There are 6 LFOs with buttons to switch among the 6. For the envelope section, there are dedicated amplitude and filter envelopes, plus freely assignable modulation envelopes, with buttons at the top of the section to move between these. The modulation area in the Edit page is particularly well designed. It shows you the most current modulations that you may have created with Omnisphere's Flex mod, and it shows you at a glance the exact state of any parameters you're controlling from moment to moment. But for total control of your modulation routings, there is a zoom settings window as well. The bottom area provides switches for toggling between layers A and B, and a handy link button. Link enables changes made in one layer to automatically be duplicated in the other. Patch level mix controls are duplicated again on the left side, and on the right, we can enable the patch's response to MIDI controller 11. So now that we've taken a look at the components of the Edit page, we can go ahead in our next video and take a look at signal flow, how these components relate to one another. Understanding audio signal flow and modulation paths will help us get the most out of Omnisphere. We can always break down signal flow into 3 primary components: sound production, sound modification, and sound output, with controls at each of those stages modulated by performance gestures, envelopes, and LFOs. So our sound begins with a sample or synthesized waveform. From there, it moves to the sound processing options found within the oscillator section itself. It's here that much of the color of Omnisphere's patches can be created using a variety of sound processing techniques, including FM, hard sync, ring mod, and more. From the oscillator section, the sound moves on to the filter section. 2 multi-mode filters are running in series or parallel. The primary function of filters is to remove frequency components within a sound. In subtractive synthesis, filters are the primary sound shaping tool. Once the sound has been created and then modified, it moves on to an output stage. The mix section provides basic controls for volume, pan, and pitch. After this, there's one more potential stop on the signal flow train before signals leave the patch. A virtual rack of signal processing options, such as delay, reverb, EQ, distortion, and so on, are available for each layer or for the patch as a whole. As you'll quickly discover when running through Omnisphere's library, the effects provide a very distinctive and important component to most of the sounds in the library. Finally, the sound leaves the patch and it arrives at the multi-mixer. Up to 8 parts can be loaded into a multi, and here they can be given their own volume, pan, and virtual output into your host sequencer. The multi-mixer has its own independent effects rack. The multi-effects rack utilizes aux sends, or a wet-dry approach to effects, rather than the insert effect type of approach found within the patch itself. To summarize signal flow in the patch editor, all sounds originate with the sound source in the oscillator section. The sound source is further processed by sound shaping capabilities such as FM, hard sync, ring mod, and so on, before moving on to the filter section for additional sound shaping. The sound leaves the filter section and it goes to a mix section where its volume, pan, and pitch can be controlled, and where it can be processed by dedicated insert effects within the patch for each layer. Any of the parameters along this audio signal path can be modulated by the envelopes or low-frequency oscillators also found in the edit page. In addition, parameters can be controlled by MIDI performance gestures such as note velocity, pitch bend, and mod wheel, or by automation from the host sequencer. So now that we have the basic picture of how things are laid out, it's time to get down to the details. Let's check them out in the following videos.